number will rake in about about $2 or $3 per record. Now, an important part of building up and maintaining these botnets is really about the aging processes. So the identity information themselves ages very rapidly. So abuse frequency, so the bots, if they're actually being used for abuse, will decrease the value of the host, but also the value of the identities that are retrieved from that particular host. The type of abuse also has the most effect on the value. Now, if looking at those leads and the lead generation sites, the normal cost per lead is about $20. Price reduces $5 every 7 days, so there's an aging process there. Reduces in value about 20% by every single time that you sell it. So reselling the information actually decreases the value as well. Okay. Now, by breaking it down by a particular country or state, actually increases the value of those sales as well, though. Now, looking at an aging of a botnet, is looking at high level of where are the most valuable parts versus the age and noisiness. And apparently, the identity theft, while it has high value, is very short duration. So you can't actually operate those particular victims and those botnets for very long. And as you sort of move down scale, things become more noisy and the value decreases. And I think most people sort of understand that. Okay. The aging of systems is important. So how long do I retain access and extract data from those victim systems? So if I'm able to hold on to those systems longer, then I can get more value out of those systems. And by increasing the robustness of the malware agents themselves, then you'll actually increase the age that you hold onto these systems and the value of the records that are pulled from them. An area I was interested as well really is looking at virtual reputations. So given all the types of sites that are out there today, yes, you have all of your home email address, home phone number, all this sort of thing that can be sold as a legitimate identity. But actually your virtual identities and the reputation of those virtual identities has a value of its own as well, and it's becoming even more important. So botnets already provide that service of being able to copy and duplicate identities. So social networks, email relationships, family units, all that sort of stuff are interesting. Now, when you have a look at a victim machine, then it seems to be about per victim inside a botnet, there's about 2.5 virtual identities per machine on average. Now, if you want to, the botnet operators are also going into an area of actually creating their own virtual identities. And so every single victim inside that botnet will actually be able to handle somewhere between 20 and 100 virtual identities. And so what we see is now, the ability to take stolen virtual identities and the reputations and apply those identities and reputations to validate newly created and minted reputations and virtual identities. And that's really like, driving a whole new business, if you like, the virtual identities. So by being able to, use those stolen identities, you can build and attract more through social engineering, more drive spam, increase infections, and sort of grow your botnet. But you do get noticed awfully quickly, and it's not particularly scalable. But the virtual identities, so the ones that have been created completely from scratch, become their own self-reinforcing system. So being able to build a number of virtual identities, validate a number of real identities. Now using those recently validated reputations, these newly minted ones, to validate newly minted ones. So it becomes a recursive feedback loop. And some of the botnet operators are breaking into the 2 million to 5 million virtual identities on popular sites. Now, we're seeing the reputation of these types of virtual identities already being abused. So, stock trading, so being able to influence trading prices, free stuff accounts, sales ranking. So a week before last, the abuse of iTunes, ensuring that popular applications appeared high up on the list by using those reputations and buying patterns. So what it means is that the online reputation and voting system becoming more and more important, and so the value of those is actually increasing. So while there is there's actually a sizable investment in actually building a botnet to be able to handle this type of identity fraud and information, it's become the value of those systems that rely on those identities has been growing, and so the ability to monetize those has been growing as well. Interesting enough, there's not an awful lot of information about how to prosecute from a fraud perspective. So generally, the stuff is about abuse of site terms, and prosecutions are going to be very difficult. So by building up those reputation systems, there are a lot of things that we're sort of seeing. So things like extortion on Craigslist. So buyers and sellers or people providing services on Craigslist are being approached by botnet operators, where they can effectively say, well, I can give you 100 positive endorsements for $20 per month. Or if you don't want to pay me, then I can give you 1,000 negative endorsements, and you're not going to be able to use that service anymore. And so it's a typical sort of, we'll break your windows if you don't pay type scams, and that's that now exists on many of these sites, purely because of the reputation that can be assigned and voted on, or comments that can be left behind. Betting agencies, so abuse of things like dancing on the stars, so online portals that are allow you to place bets on who's going to win this week's or tonight's Dancing with the Stars type thing. Being able to place a bet in a betting agency, but then being able to use your botnet to actually help vote out that particular person, so influencing the results there. So a lot of other ones there, but really making money. So racketeering is really the key area there, and so a lot of the focus at the moment it tends to be high, fairly high volume, but mainly targeted on small vendors, where the cost to these victims is somewhere between $20 and $100. So this isn't the victim computers, but this is people that rely on these types of services, such as Craigslist and eBay. Buying votes, so being able to use the most popular social networking platforms and all that, being able to buy those votes and virtual votes. The retail price seems to be, at the moment, about $100 per 1,000 identities that you're going to use for voting. So sort of rapidly wrap up here. So the business models are very, botnet building is actually very easy. It's plenty of tutorials. It doesn't take a genius to do this. The necessary skills for being able to build and construct your first botnet relies on two things. One is the knowledge on how to install a piece of software on your own machine, and the second piece of knowledge is how to use Google search. Okay. If you're competent in either of those two areas, you can start building your first botnets. Okay. Now, a lot of the work that's really going on today is building up long-term botnets and to keep those botnets running for the longest time possible. So there's been a massive move away from short-term, short-lived, high-volume types of attacks and things. So while we have, I mentioned about spam campaigns running and all this sort of stuff, specialized providers. It's not new starters in this area, and if you want to keep your botnet running for a longer time and using things such as, identity laundering type systems or reputation type systems to make real money from the botnets, then it has to be low and slow, and you don't want any of those types of noisy attacks because you'll get detected. Okay. So what are the biggest earners today? From the cash rewards, they're actually paying out as in real cash that you can retire on, as opposed to trying to figure out how to trade certain goods around. Short-term campaign building of botnets, so just building a botnet and selling it on to someone else. Being able to do that in an efficient model has the highest yield in the short term. Now, in the medium term, identity laundering. So being able to take the information that's harvested from those machines and from those victims, or the new victims and your old victims, and keeping that information fresh will generate high value. Longer term, I think the virtual reputation systems are probably going to be the most elegant way, I guess, of making real money. So, locating of the botnets, today tends to focus on the output from those botnets. So things such as spam, DDoS, and brute forcing types of things. It's very easy to identify the botnets that are actually doing that. So, dealing with those. But I think one of the key things, and sort of to end this really is about the bot master itself. So, let's be pretty clear about this. The probability that your botnet is legal is actually pretty high. But the thing is, like, if you're actually doing illegal stuff from your botnet, the probability of actually being detected is actually pretty high. Okay, and the probability that you could get caught is pretty high. But then again, it's not particularly guaranteed, and the folks that have been caught haven't really been successfully prosecuted yet. So with that, in the last few minutes, I'll open for any questions. Sure, question in front. So, question related to why hasn't there been a wave of takedowns given some of the high-profile takedowns that have been there? Well, I think a couple of things. So one is that all the botnets are largely independent, and the modern way of running botnets is multiple campaigns, and they're all quite separate from each other. So you have multiple operators running multiple campaigns, selling and horse trading different sort of systems there. So it becomes much more difficult to provide attribution to particular operators. The other key part really is that, frankly, the laws don't really cover well this type of business and prosecution of botnet operators. So the successful prosecutions or attempts at prosecutions have not been about the botnets or the malware. They've been about the frauds and typically the credit card fraud and credit card transactions that are being used as a way of forcing sort of jail time. Many of the botnet operators don't actually go down that fraud route, so they're not worried about those types of prosecutions today. Any last questions before everyone pigs out for lunch? So one at the back there somewhere. Thanks, Sean. So one last question before we'll get some lunch. That's a long question. So when it comes to So when it comes to a question perspective of providing attribution to the operators and the guys that are behind there, in many cases a level of attribution is possible. Okay, certainly from my company, we do a lot of attribution to individual operators. However, much of that attribution is multiple levels of of identities that were traced back, and being able to provide that sort of level of attribution is fine for us, and maybe useful from a name and shame publicly type